when a married Florida woman found herself wanting to spend time with another man without her husband finding out in 2016. She decided to fake her own kidnapping. 32-year-old strip club bartender Carla Vasquez called her husband, David Pacheco, at 4:30 a.m. while he worked an overnight shift. She claimed that there were two men sitting in her car outside the couple's Miami residence, prompting Pacheco to rush home. When Pacheco arrived at the house an hour and a half later, Vasquez and her car were gone. He called his wife, who claimed she had been kidnapped and was being held hostage. Police searched for Vasquez for hours. At 3 p.m. that day, officers saw her driving her vehicle with a man in the passenger seat. During questioning, Vasquez admitted that she had voluntarily gone straight to the man's house after finishing her work shift and that he had not mistreated her in any way, but she wanted to buy some time away from her husband without piquing suspicions about her infidelity, hence the decision to fake her abduction. The man Vasquez was with told police that he had met the married woman at her job. After she finished working, they went bar hopping and even took photos together. Based on the images, it seemed as though they had had a good time. Vasquez was charged with providing a false report of the commission of a crime. She was released on her own recognizance, and records show that the case was resolved without jail time. Number 18, Matthew Amezquita.
Well, listen, what we need to do right now is I need you to take off your gear, okay? So you can just put that down. You can just put your phone down or whatever. But I'm gonna take this from you, okay?
Upon arriving at work one morning in July of 2024, 21-year-old rookie police officer Matthew Amezquita was sent home to shave. A short while later, he called his workplace, the Ruidoso Police Department in New Mexico, and requested a police unit at his address, claiming that his apartment had been broken into and that there were signs of forced entry. Amezquita told the responding members of his department that after he returned home and shaved, he realized he had left his body cam behind at his apartment. He returned to the residence and, according to his version of events, found his front door wide open. In body cam footage of Amezquita's conversation with his colleagues, a detective expresses skepticism about his story. With some prodding, Amezquita admitted that he had lost his keys and had kicked his door in so he could retrieve his body cam. The detective speculated that Amezquita lied because he was trying to avoid paying damages for the door or was worried about getting in trouble at work for running late, but he didn't explain his reasons. Amezquita's boss gave him a heart-to-heart, telling him that his decision to lie didn't mean that he would never work in law enforcement again, but that his mistake needed to serve as a learning experience. Just 6 weeks into his career as a police officer, the rookie cop exchanged his badge and gun for a place at the Lincoln County Detention Center, where he was booked into custody on a misdemeanor charge of making a false report. Number 17, Amanda Zarosinski. 43-year-old Freddie Douglas, an officer with the El Campo Police Department in Texas, lost everything after he was accused of forcing himself on a woman named Amanda Zarosinski. She was the neighbor of Douglas's best friend, 41-year-old John Marks. In May of 2023, Marks purchased a newly built 5-bedroom, 3.5-bathroom house on Palermo Way in Manville. Zarosinski had recently separated from her husband, and not long after, Marks had moved to the neighborhood. They began having a physical relationship. On November the 11th, Marks and Douglas returned to the former's home after attending a Houston Rockets basketball game. Zarosinski joined them for a late-night swim. The trio had relations, but a few weeks later, the woman contacted the police claiming that Marks and Douglas had abused her. She admitted to the pre-existing relationship with the former, but maintained that on the night in question, she'd refused to have relations with him. Zarosinski reported that he and Douglas then forced themselves upon her in a brutal attack that left her needing surgery to repair internal and external physical damage. Marks and Douglas were promptly arrested on charges that included aggravated assault and aggravated kidnapping. Douglas, who'd twice been named Officer of the Year was terminated from his job. He had to sell his home to cover legal fees and needed help from his mother to come up with $100,000 to bond out of jail. The case was eventually dismissed by a grand jury based on cell phone videos as well as footage from Marks's home surveillance system, which showed that the trio had had consensual relations. Zarosinski initially had intercourse with Marks in the pool before she was intimate with Douglas as well. Marks recorded them on his cell phone as they had intercourse. The authorities concluded that Zarosinski had at no point looked uncomfortable. Moreover, she was recorded alone inside the house as the men stayed by the pool and made no effort to flee, even though she later claimed to have been held captive. Marks and Douglas filed separate lawsuits against the city of Manville, 3 Manville police officers, and Zarosinski for civil rights violations, defamation, and malicious prosecution. The men claimed that Manville authorities were determined to convict them and initially refused to look at the footage that would have exonerated them. Officers were even recorded discussing the existence of the video evidence outside of Marks's home, but reportedly made no effort to immediately investigate it. One officer even pondered that perhaps Zarosinski did consent. As of the latest information available on the matter, Zarosinski maintained her side of the story and launched a countersuit. Number 16. James Tedesco IV. In November of 2021, an Indian River County deputy pulled over an SUV for speeding and using flashing lights on Interstate 95 in Vero Beach, Florida. When asked why he was driving nearly 100 miles per hour with red and blue police lights activated, 43-year-old James Tedesco IV said that he was a firefighter on his way to a fire call in Miami. In an apparent attempt to garner leniency, he also claimed that he was working as an FDNY firefighter when the World Trade Center towers fell in New York City on September 11, 2001. Skeptical of these claims, the deputy called the FDNY and spoke with someone who verified that Tedesco worked for the department from 2003 until he medically retired in 2018. He was not employed as a New York City firefighter or 9/11 like he had claimed. After initially telling law enforcement that he was en route to a fire call in Miami, Tedesco admitted that he had lied and said he was on his way to go fishing. He said he lied because he got scared and didn't know what to say. Inside Tedesco's SUV, deputies found 2 AR-15 rifles, over 1,000 rounds of ammunition, a gas mask, brass knuckles, over an ounce of marijuana, an NYPD jacket, and a Drug Enforcement Administration hat. He was charged with felony counts of impersonating a police officer and possession of marijuana over 20 grams. Records show that he pleaded no contest to the marijuana charge and was sentenced to time served. Number 15. Jenny Keats Rawling. 31-year-old Jake Green of Manchester, England, became the victim of a relentless stalker after ending their relationship in April of 2023. His ex-girlfriend, 30-year-old Jenny Keats Rawling, barraged him with unwanted phone calls, made false police complaints depicting him as a mass murderer and a thief, and showed him a fake sonogram image while claiming that she was pregnant with his child. She also tried to turn his family against him, called him while pretending to be a police officer, and got him fired from 2 jobs. In one instance, Keats Rawling sent law enforcement a message claiming her life was in danger and that Green was hearing voices that were telling him to kill people. Officers were dispatched to Green's home, but the manhunt was called off after the police discovered that the message was a hoax. Keats Rawling also targeted Green's new girlfriend with messages telling her to watch her back and claims that Green was financially abusing the woman. Green blocked Keats Rawling from numerous social media platforms but was continuously victimized. Even after police told the woman to leave him alone, left with no other choice, he sought to press criminal charges against Keats Rawling. His mental health was ravaged by his ex's stalking, which lasted for 6 months and left him fearing for his life. Green later said that his family had tried to help Keats Rawling, who doesn't work and struggles with mental health issues. But her lies and manipulation eventually became too much for them to deal with. In February of 2024, Keats Rawling pleaded guilty to stalking causing serious alarm or distress. She could have faced up to 18 months in prison, but the judge spared her from any time behind bars and instead sentenced her to an 18-month community order. She was also banned from contacting Green and his new girlfriend, and the judge warned her that if she violated the terms of her supervision, she would be sent to prison. Number 14. Alec Blair. When 22-year-old Gabrielle Gabe Clevenger of Mansfield, Ohio, vanished in February of 2020, her estranged husband, 21-year-old Alec Blair, immediately became a person of interest in the case. The couple had only been married for 8 months but had already encountered problems in the relationship, resulting in their separation. Following Clevenger's disappearance, Blair initially told detectives that he had beaten and strangled her to death. He said he had lured Clevenger into his car under the promise that they would drive to a local courthouse and file for their divorce, which he had no actual intention of doing. Blair led police to a remote, wooded area where he had dumped Clevenger's body. Immediately upon seeing the woman's remains, investigators knew Blair was lying about strangling her to death. Clevenger had been stabbed so viciously that she was nearly decapitated. Less than a week before her murder, Clevenger had gone to court in an attempt to obtain a restraining order against Blair. The judge denied her request, citing a failure to prove domestic violence. Despite Clevenger presenting evidence of repeated threats and harassment, including unwanted visits to her home. While many people blamed the judge for refusing to issue an order of protection, it's impossible to say whether it would have stopped Blair from killing Clevenger 8 months after the murder. Blair pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, kidnapping, felonious assault, abduction, tampering with evidence, and gross abuse of a corpse. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison and will become eligible for parole in December of 2064. Number 13. Anthony Michael Harper.
How you doing?
Anthony.
Dennis, nice to meet you. Who you work for?
I'm a recovery agent.
Oh, okay. Put y'all patrol out here or something?
I come out and like make my presence known. A lot of folks out here, you know, they're always on something or have warrants or anything like that.
Oh, I see.
All right, go ahead and turn around, put your hands behind your back.
What am I being arrested for?
In August of 2022, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office in Arizona received a complaint about a man in an SUV following a security vehicle in a parking lot. Security guards showed responding deputies a video from a few days earlier, which showed the suspect, 22-year-old Anthony Michael Harper, handcuffing and detaining a man outside a Circle K gas station. In the footage, Harper appeared to be wearing a tactical vest while introducing himself as an officer and searching the man. Another video contained footage of a conversation between Harper and the security guards who were suspicious of him. In it, the guards pretended to be impressed by Harper's SUV, which was outfitted with flashing lights. Harper could be heard talking about his involvement in suspiciously police-like activities, like detaining suspects and working patrols. He described himself as a bounty hunter of sorts, without actually using that term, and claimed that he worked short-term gigs for various law enforcement agencies. Harper was not a real cop, and to the deputies who reviewed the footage, he seemed to be impersonating one. The man Harper had detained outside the Circle K gas station told investigators that he thought Harper was a real officer based on how he acted upon being confronted about his deceptive behavior. Harper said that he thought he was acting within his rights as a bounty hunter when he detained and searched the man, but he acknowledged that a reasonable person would believe he was a police officer based on the way he introduced himself as one, and admitted that he was not even a certified security guard. Harper was charged with unlawful imprisonment and impersonating a peace officer. The outcome of his case is unclear. Number 12. Sharon Tony Finch. Started in 2016, an Army veteran from New York named Sharon Tony Finch allegedly began fraudulently collecting disability benefits by falsely claiming that she had been injured in a mortar attack while serving overseas 6 years earlier. Then over a 4-year period started in 2019, she misused money donated to a charity she founded for homeless veterans, namely by spending it on herself. Tony also claimed to be a Purple Heart recipient, but there's no record of this being the case. Yet she still managed to be inducted into the New York State Senate Veterans Hall of Fame, based on claims that federal authorities are now saying were false. According to prosecutors, she obtained her stolen valor using a forged military discharge certificate. In May of 2024, federal prosecutors charged Toni Finch with 4 fraud-related counts for lying about her Purple Heart and defrauding military charities. But this isn't the first time she's made news headlines for being dishonest. In May of 2023, a year before her arrest, Toni Finch had persuaded a group of homeless men to pose as veterans who had been kicked out of an upstate hotel shelter to make room for newly arrived immigrants. It wasn't true, but the scheme caused widespread outrage among civilians and politicians alike, many of whom already viewed asylum-seeking newcomers in a negative light. The story made the front page of the New York Post and many other news outlets. Meanwhile, State Assemblyman Brian Mayer went on Fox News to discuss a new proposed bill which would protect homeless veterans from losing their temporary housing to immigrants. The story fell apart when some of the more diligent reporters who covered the case couldn't find any homeless veterans in the area where the hotel is located. They also spoke with employees at the hotel who found no recent record of housing homeless veterans. Eventually, the men who pretended to be homeless veterans disclosed who had recruited them for the task. They claimed that Toni Finch had wined and dined them before pitching the job, and that she had never paid them the $100 each that they were promised for it. U.S. Representative Mike Lawler, a Republican based in the area, also initially believed these claims. When he found out that it was all a lie, he was quick to point out how Toni Finch's actions could have turned an already tense situation into something much worse. Toni Finch denied that she had knowingly paraded phony homeless veterans in front of the press, but the incident only sparked further investigation into her credibility, which appears to be what drew the attention of investigators. Her criminal case is ongoing. Number 11. Matthew David Kieran's. In 2019, a homeless man named William Donald Woods tried to report that his identity had been stolen to a bank in Los Angeles after learning that someone had racked up considerable debt in his name. When he failed to accurately answer the security questions to prove that he was who he claimed to be, a bank employee called the police. According to records of the real William Donald Woods lived in Heartland, Wisconsin. An officer gave him a call and he said he hadn't permitted anyone to access his accounts. He faxed over a copy of his ID, which was convincing enough for law enforcement to arrest the man at the bank who they believed was named Matthew David Kieran's. The man continued to insist that he was William Woods, but nobody believed him. Due to his refusal to admit otherwise, he was found incompetent to stand trial and was placed in a mental hospital where he was put on psychiatric medication. Left with no other choice, he eventually pleaded guilty to felony charges surrounding his alleged identity theft and received a 2-year prison sentence. The judge ordered him to go by his so-called real name, Matthew Kieran's, in the future. But the man was not lying about being William Woods, and the man who had stolen his identity was named Matthew Kieran's. He spent the next 2 years trying to prove this, but his claims fell on deaf ears until 2023, when he contacted Kieran's employer, the University of Iowa, and informed them of the situation. Investigators confirmed through DNA and other evidence that Woods was telling the truth. Kieran's resorted to his usual tactic of telling the police that Woods was crazy and needed mental help, but this time it didn't work. He eventually admitted to stealing Woods' identity, resulted in his arrest and the loss of his $140,000 per year job. The men had worked together at a hot dog stand more than 3 decades earlier, and Kieran's had been living under Woods' identity for nearly that long. His activities during that time resulted in at least one arrest warrant being issued in Woods' name, and he gave his stolen last name to his bride and child. Kieran's also took out loans and lines of credit using Woods' information. In April of 2024, Kieran's pleaded guilty to 1 count of aggravated identity theft and 1 count of false statement to a National Credit Union Administration insured institution. The 58-year-old appears to be awaiting sentencing and is facing up to 25 years in prison, followed by up to 5 years of supervised release. Authorities have not disclosed his reasons for stealing Woods' identity, leaving aspects of the case shrouded in mystery. Number 10. Brian Casella. In late 2023, a married party planner in Bethel, Connecticut, was accused of creating a fake medical study for the specific purpose of indulging in a stomach fetish. According to investigators, 35-year-old Brian Casella was obsessed with touching and photographing women's midsections. Prosecutors say that he exploited one of his female employees' chronic gastrointestinal issues by offering to enroll her in a paid study that allowed him to record the sounds of her stomach. Casella offered the woman thousands of dollars for her participation and made her sign an agreement not to disclose anything about the study or her involvement in it to his wife or other employees. These so-called tests were carried out in an office at Casella's party planning business, where he initially used a stethoscope to listen to the woman's stomach. He eventually resorted to placing his ear against her abdomen. A few months later, Casella reportedly offered the woman an opportunity to make even more money by participating in a study which involved taking sleeping pills at the office. The situation seemed suspicious, so she only took a half dose and pretended to be asleep. When she expressed feeling uncomfortable, Casella persuaded her to continue with the supposed studies, which had only gotten more unusual over time. This went on for nearly a year before the woman could no longer ignore the increasingly intrusive nature of her sessions with Casella. She went to the police and agreed to confront Casella while wearing a wire, the findings of which helped law enforcement obtain a warrant to search Casella's property. Investigators found over 1,000 images on his computer depicting multiple victims, most of whom were recruited through Craigslist ads. Casella admitted that he had been engaged in this deceptive practice for years and that he knew it was wrong. He was charged with assault and is free on a $10,000 bond as he awaits the outcome of his case. Number 9. Lisa Prin Noble. In March of 2024, a family living in North Carolina learned that the nanny they had hired to care for their 4 children was wanted in Buffalo, New York, for stealing over $1 million from a church and an audiology business. After moving to North Carolina from southern Ontario, Garrett and Leah Liochko needed to hire someone to watch their kids as soon as possible. The couple thought they lucked out when they found 44-year-old Julie Wilson, who, just like Leah, was from Western New York. It gave them a comforting sense of familiarity, and the children quickly grew attached to their caretaker. Wilson was good at her job and often took the kids on outings, something the Liochkos didn't think a wanted fugitive or someone who's trying to keep a low profile would do. It was during one of these excursions that the woman, whose real name is Lisa Prin Noble, was picked up by U.S. Marshals. News of her arrest came as a shock to the Liochkos, who later reported feeling betrayed, but said that they didn't think their children were ever in danger. Prin Noble was extradited to New York, where she pleaded guilty to multiple counts of grand larceny, criminal possession of a forged instrument, and falsifying business records. As a second felony offender, she was sentenced to 8 to 19 years in prison. Number 8. Jacqueline Macwan. When a one-night stand with a man named Jamie Atkin failed to blossom into a relationship in 2019, 36-year-old Jacqueline Macwan strung the man and his family along with claims of a fake pregnancy for 9 months. During that time, she gained the sympathy of Aitken's parents, who turned partially against their son due to her claims. Macwan's fake pregnancy was discovered after she was seen looking very thin at a park in Perth, Scotland, where Aitken's brother worked. At the time, she was supposedly 8 months pregnant. After realizing she had been spotted, Macwan returned a few days later wearing a fake baby bump and made sure that the employees saw her, but her lies were ultimately exposed and she was arrested for stalking. During questioning, she told police that she actually had tested positive for pregnancy after the one-night stand, but that she had miscarried just a month or so later and had chosen not to tell the Aitkins about it. Macwan pleaded guilty to causing fear and alarm by stalking and was sentenced to 150 hours of community service. Number 7. Sarah Jane Kavanaugh. Started in 2016, a Veterans Affairs social worker in Warwick, Rhode Island, posed as a combat-injured former U.S. Marine despite having never served in the military. 31-year-old Sarah Jane Kavanaugh claimed that she had been injured in combat while serving in Iraq and Afghanistan between 2009 and 2016, and that she was suffering from late-stage lung cancer caused by exposure to burn pits and IED particles during that time. She also claimed to be a Purple Heart and Bronze Star recipient, using embellished tales and forged documents. Kavanaugh collected more than $250,000 in benefits from at least 9 agencies and organizations that are devoted to helping veterans in need. She was also accused of reaping other benefits, including extra paid time off from her job and 2 all-expenses-paid vacations with a charity that believed she had less than a year to live. During her Stolen Valor run, Kavanaugh became the commander of her local Veterans of Foreign Wars post and posed as a former Marine at various events, but her lies began to unravel after a member of a veteran-led non-profit went to pay one of her cancer bills and learned that she was not a patient of the clinic she claimed she was receiving treatment at. Federal investigators discovered that Kavanaugh had altered real veterans' medical and service records to include her information. In early 2022, Kavanaugh was charged with a slew of federal crimes, which could have put her behind bars for nearly 25 years. She pleaded guilty to aggravated identity theft, forged military discharge certificates, fraudulent use of military medals, and 4 counts of wire fraud, and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Number 6. Kirk Wilding. In September of 2024, Greater Manchester man Kirk Wilding was jailed for 11 years after he admitted to having an intimate relationship with a girl in her mid-teens. The 43-year-old, who was a local DJ, began grooming the victim after he'd initially dated her mother for 6 months. The father of 2 treated the teen as his secret girlfriend, while falsely claiming that their relationship was purely platonic. They exchanged hundreds of messages professing their love, with one of Wilding's texts reading, "It's you and I don't want anyone else." At some point, the victim and her mother attended a party where Wilding was also a guest. No one yet knew that he and the teen were intimately involved. The mother went home, but it had been previously arranged that her daughter would spend the night at the address. The host of the party found her having relations with Wilding the following morning and told them both to leave the home. The teen's mother was told about the incident, but Wilding called the witness a liar. The teen ran away from home in the incident's wake, and when she returned, she was drunk and had love bites on her neck. She denied having a boyfriend, but after social services were alerted, officials forensically examined a pair of her underwear, which tested positive for Wilding's DNA. The girl also underwent a pregnancy test, and after it proved positive, she ran away from home again. She was found sleeping on a couch at Wilding's home, and the man was arrested shortly thereafter. When questioned whether he was in a relationship with the teen, he replied, "Oh God, no." The victim initially refused to speak against him, but in May of 2023, she agreed to make a statement to the police. She said that Wilding had engaged in controlling and grooming behavior towards her, and that he made her feel trapped and isolated. The victim added, "He turned me against my family, and I couldn't say anything because of what he was doing to me." She was 29 weeks pregnant when she gave her statement. Wilding admitted to the relationship and pleaded guilty to the charges stemming from it only after DNA tests proved he was the father of the victim's child. In addition to the 11-year sentence, he was handed an indefinite restraining order from the victim. She gave birth in August of 2024, and while Wilding could fight for the right to see his child under family court laws, the young woman was adamant that she wanted no contact with him. Number 5. Tahira Enoka. An Australian kickboxer was arrested in Perth on June the 6th of 2024 for running a scam in which she faked having cancer. Between March and September of 2021, hundreds of people from over a dozen countries donated to a crowdfunding page that was created to support 35-year-old Tahira Enoka. In a YouTube video that featured the hashtag #StandWithTahira, the mother of 4 claimed that she suffered from breast cancer and cervical cancer. The contact athlete fought back tears as she told prospective donors, "We're raising the money to help pay for the treatments that I need to potentially save my life so that I can be here for my kids to watch them grow up." The woman claimed that she'd learned it is okay to ask for help. Over $25,000 were raised for Enoka, who transferred the money to her personal account before the GoFundMe page was eventually deleted. Investigators subsequently found that she was never sick, resulting in her arrest for gaining benefit by fraud. When her lies came to light, GoFundMe announced it was proactively refunding all the people who'd contributed to her fundraiser. Number 4. Dimitri Stoer. On July the 29th of 2024, a mass stabbing took place at a dance studio in Southport, England, resulting in 3 deaths and nearly a dozen injuries. The perpetrator was teenager Axel Ruda Cubana, a Cardiff-born British citizen, but initial reports misidentified him as a Muslim migrant or asylum seeker. Protests, many fueled by anti-immigrant rhetoric, erupted across England. Riots and clashes with law enforcement were widely reported, leading to over 1,000 arrests. Amidst increased fears of disorder, Romanian national Dimitri Stoer went live on TikTok while walking through Derby on August the 7th. At some point during the live stream, he started running, claiming he was being chased by extreme right-wing rioters. He told his viewers, "I am running, bro, because they are running after me. They're coming. Everyone get back." There were, however, no problems at the time, and Stoer had fabricated the claims in an attempt to get more followers. The police tracked him down, and the man admitted that he hadn't been chased or afraid for his life. Dismissing the live stream as a joke, he was arrested and admitted to 1 count of sending a false communication with intent to cause harm. Stoer was jailed for 3 months in order to pay £154 in compensation. Local law enforcement told the media that they would be quickly and robustly dealing with any attempt at spreading panic through misinformation. Assistant Chief Constable Michelle Shooter was quoted as saying, "We have seen the extraordinary power of social media over the last 2 weeks, and with that power comes even greater responsibility." Number 3. Amanda Simansky. While driving through Lapeer County, Michigan, on July the 2nd of 2023, an Amazon driver failed to yield to a teenager behind the wheel of a GMC Acadia. The vehicles collided, resulting in the Amazon driver suffering life-threatening injuries. Good Samaritans who'd witnessed the crash helped him, but the teen fled the scene. His mother, 45-year-old Amanda Simansky, was an officer with the Ferndale Police Department who'd been named the 2017 Mothers Against Drunk Driving Officer of the Year. Simansky, who was off duty, arrived at the scene of the crash and told the other officers that she'd been in the vehicle with her son. Detectives followed up on her statements and, after examining witness reports and other evidence, determined that she was lying. In July of 2024, Simansky was charged with providing false information to a police officer. Her son was previously charged with failure to stop at the scene of an accident resulting in serious impairment or death, a 5-year felony. Both their cases were ongoing as of September of 2024. Today's topic was requested by Cloud95651 and JB Unites. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Tracy and Robert Ashbridge. Between 2015 and 2019, British couple Tracy and Robert Ashbridge from Sunderland, England, carried out a scam through which they illegally obtained over £300,000 from the benefits system. 44-year-old Tracy, the scam's mastermind, had been employed by HM Revenue and Customs since 2012. Starting in 2015, she used her knowledge as a tax worker to illegally obtain benefits. Tracy claimed that 3 of her children were disabled and made up tax credit claims for another 15 fictitious children. During the investigation that followed, Robert was proven to have been fully aware and supportive of his wife's scheming. In February of 2018, after making one of the fraudulent claims, Tracy messaged him asking if they should have more children, and when he asked how they would manage, she clarified, "Not physically, LOL." Robert then wrote back, "Do you mean money?" Tracy moved the ill-gotten funds through 9 separate bank accounts, and had all her fraudulent claims been successful, she would have obtained nearly £500,000. She admitted 6 charges of fraud and was jailed for 2 years and 4 months in 2023. Robert was determined to have had a lesser role in the scheme and was sentenced to 18 months, suspended for 2 years. The authorities seized a total of £7,614 from the couple's home when they were arrested. In spite of gaining a fortune, Tracy and Robert were each required to pay back only £1 in September of 2024, after it was determined that they had no assets to cover what they owed the state. If you thought these instances of spreading nonsense couldn't piss you off even more, just wait until you see how bad it can get with sheer ignorance. We've got our release of When Blissful Ignorance Goes Wrong coming up right after number 1, so stay tuned. Number 1. Liam Smith. In January of 2024, Liam Smith was tried at England's Newcastle Crown Court for making up stories about being abused by men, some of whom he had met through the Grindr dating app. At various points between 2018 and 2021, Smith accused 6 men of forcing themselves on him at various locations, including Newcastle, South Tyneside and Sunderland. As laid out in court, the 27-year-old's false accusations resulted in the victims being arrested, interviewed, detained, and subjected to intrusive police examination. They consequently suffered enormous anxiety and embarrassment. On multiple occasions, Smith withdrew his complaints when confronted with stark evidence of his lies. One of the men he accused had a medical condition that would have made it impossible for the abuse to occur. Another was confirmed to have been with his boyfriend at a cafe when Smith claimed that the abuse had taken place. Towards the end of 2020, the police started investigating the latter for perverting the course of justice. While he was still being investigated, Smith called the police and accused a 6th man of abusing him. The victim was arrested and held for over 10 hours, during which various samples were taken from him. When the police examined his phone, they found Grindr messages exchanged between him and Smith. Before investigators could save or screenshot them, the message disappeared, indicating that Smith was deleting them from his own device. He was arrested and charged with 7 counts of doing acts tending or intending to pervert the course of justice, to which he pleaded not guilty. Crown prosecutors claimed that the man either had trouble distinguishing fact from fiction or was a potential fantasist with a latent desire for attention. Smith's trial was ongoing as of the latest updates. On the night of April the 10th of 2022, Stephanie Melgoza dialed 911 to report that she'd crashed her car outside the Full Throttle bar in East Peoria, Illinois. When officers arrived at the scene, they came upon the young woman's red Dodge Dart, completely wrecked with a severed leg sticking out of the grille. Melgoza, at the time in her early 20s, watched with callous indifference as first responders attempted to resuscitate a couple in critical condition whom she'd struck outside the bar. The victims, identified as 43-year-old Andrea Rosowitz and Paul Prowant, aged 55, were both pronounced dead at the scene. Melgoza admitted to consuming 3 vodka drinks that evening, but indicated she was just getting her night started. Law enforcement found an open bottle of Tito's vodka on the floor of her vehicle. Melgoza seemed wholly oblivious to the extremely grave nature of the situation, as she smiled and joked with officers at the scene. In body cam footage, she was shown giggling as she struggled to complete field sobriety tests. When she was unable to follow an officer's flashlight with her eyes, she said, "I told you it's hard." Melgoza was eventually brought to OSF St. Francis Hospital, where her blood alcohol level registered at 0.264, more than 3 times the legal limit. The disturbing body cam footage continued at the hospital, as the suspect failed to display any semblance of remorse or concern for the 2 people she'd killed. She even expressed excitement for an upcoming trip to Las Vegas she had planned, saying, "It's going to be so fun. I'm going to start off with 2 Long Islands." In response, an officer asked, "You haven't had enough of drinking already?" To which Melgoza replied with a laugh, "We're talking about Vegas. There's no limit in Vegas, right?" In the spring of 2023, the young woman pled guilty to 4 felony charges, including 2 counts of aggravated DUI death. She was consequently sentenced to 14 years in prison. As her punishment was being handed down, Melgoza tearfully apologized for her actions, vowing never to drink alcohol again. Number 7. Shanda Johnson Williams. Oklahoma man Jamie Williams was found unresponsive at his Fort Towson residence on November the 17th of 2019. The 48-year-old had been stabbed numerous times with a fillet knife by his wife, Shanda Johnson Williams. who was also 48 at the time. When law enforcement came upon the victim, they called emergency medical crews to the scene. However, by the time paramedics arrived, Williams had already succumbed to his wounds. 2 days later, Johnson Williams was located at another Fort Towson home and was arrested on first-degree murder charges. The woman subsequently made headlines for her behavior while being taken into custody. Specifically, when her mug shot was captured, she sported a grin, seemingly unaware of or undeterred by the unfeeling nature of the expression given the circumstances. The resulting murder trial commenced in September of 2022 in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Oklahoma in Muskogee. According to a press release by the U.S. Attorney's Office, which prosecuted the case, Johnson Williams was ultimately found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. The punishment stemming from the conviction wasn't disclosed. Number 6. Daval Patel. In the early hours of May 2nd of 2022, deputies from the Laurel County Sheriff's Office in Kentucky were called to a parking lot off Highway 312 near the City of London. The office had received numerous complaints that night about a suspicious vehicle. Upon arrival at the scene, deputies encountered 34-year-old Daval Patel from Mount Juliet, Tennessee. The man was seated behind the wheel of a black Chevrolet Traverse with an open container of alcohol in the center console. It was determined that Patel was in fact intoxicated, and he was consequently taken into custody. According to police records, the man protested his arrest, claiming he hadn't been aware that drinking and driving was against the law. His baffling ignorance wasn't enough to keep him from being charged with operating a motor vehicle under the influence and possession of an open alcoholic beverage container in a motor vehicle. Number 5. Jeffrey Guy SAS. Shortly after 5 a.m. on November 1st of 2015, a burglary alarm drew the police in Portland, Oregon, to the upscale multi-level Orchard Supply hardware store on Northeast Halsey Street. Responding officers immediately noticed obvious signs of a break-in and took note of a vehicle parked outside the building. Upon entering the store, law enforcement heard someone rummaging around and subsequently came upon a male suspect attempting to open a safe near the cash registers. The man, identified as 43-year-old Jeffrey Guy SAS, had targeted the establishment, which reportedly sold standard hardware merchandise such as hammers and fertilizers, as well as high-end lawn equipment, boutique patio furniture, and holiday decor displays. SAS allegedly hadn't anticipated that breaking into the store would trigger an alarm, which was why he'd remained inside long enough for police to arrive. He was arrested and charged with burglary, criminal mischief, and possession of burglary tools. Number 4. Thomas Allen Waits. 69-year-old Thomas Allen Waits got behind the wheel of his 2005 GMC Canyon pickup on the night of June the 29th of 2019. The man had reportedly consumed alcohol earlier in the evening but thought he felt well enough to drive. After Waits drove up a hill and went around a bend in the road, he entered the path of an oncoming motorcycle at the intersection of West Roller Coaster Road and North Grand Avenue. In Tucson, Arizona, the two vehicles collided, ejecting 41-year-old Benjamin Chavez and Lydia Carter, aged 53, off the bike. Pima County Sheriff's deputies responded to the scene and found both Chavez and Carter with severe injuries. They were both ultimately pronounced dead. Chavez at the scene and Carter at a local hospital. Law enforcement also made contact with Waits, who was standing near his truck and seemingly unaware of the carnage he'd caused. Despite realizing that he'd hit something, the man neglected to look for any casualties or investigate the crowd of people that had formed near where the riders landed. Waits told officers that he didn't feel the effects of the alcohol he drank, but was nevertheless arrested on charges of driving under the influence and criminal damage, in addition to 2 counts of manslaughter. Number 3. Jacqueline J Wells. A retired Illinois police captain named Andrew Toll hopped on his bicycle and went for a ride in Galesburg, a small city about 50 miles outside of Peoria, on May the 9th of 2017. As he pedaled down a rural road near a boat launch on Lake Bracken, a red Jeep pulled up alongside him. The woman behind the wheel started honking her horn and yelling profanities at Toll before ramming the vehicle into him, knocking him off the bike. The motorist, subsequently identified as Jacqueline J Wells, then proceeded to run the retiree over as she sped off. 61-year-old Toll was taken to the hospital with broken bones in his arms and legs, as well as a fractured pelvis. Shortly after medical crews had arrived to treat the man, Wells was spotted dragging his bicycle beneath her Jeep on the roadway nearby. She was arrested on several charges, including attempted murder, aggravated reckless driving, failure to stop after a crash causing injury, and 4 counts of aggravated battery. In her booking photo, Wells flashed a toothy smile, appearing jovial despite the violent crime she had just committed. In June of 2018, the woman was deemed mentally fit to stand trial. However, following court proceedings in November, a circuit judge overlooked the initial ruling and found Wells not guilty by reason of insanity. Citing testimony from doctors and witnesses, the decision was met with controversy, with critics contending that the burden of proving insanity is normally left to the defense. Nevertheless, the prosecution declined to challenge the judge's decree. Wells was detained at a mental health facility, having been ordered to undergo a specific treatment plan, the details of which weren't disclosed to the public. Number 2. Anjanette Marie Welk. In May of 2018, a devastating traffic collision occurred on U.S. Highway 27 in Marion County, Florida. 60-year-old Sandra Clarkston had been in the passenger seat of her car as her teenage daughter was driving. They were stopped at a red light when a Chevy Avalanche traveling at approximately 73 miles per hour suddenly rear-ended them. The impact sent Clarkston's car into the back of a tractor-trailer. The woman was hospitalized in critical condition, and although her daughter survived the incident, she was pronounced dead 4 days later. The individual behind the wheel of the Avalanche was identified as Ocala resident Anjanette Marie Welk, at the time in her mid-40s. Responding law enforcement noted that Welk was acting lethargic, slurring her words, and smelled of alcohol. She failed the ensuing sobriety test, and her BAC was measured to be roughly twice the legal limit. In the mugshot she took after being taken into custody, Welk displayed a wide smile and tilted her head as though posing for the camera. The picture sparked outrage among those who found her chipper demeanor insensitive and ignorant as to the seriousness of her actions. A week later, upon being bonded out, Welk married her 46-year-old partner after quickly obtaining a marriage license. With a judge's permission, the couple subsequently moved to Washington state. The woman was tried for the deadly crash in May of 2019. She pleaded no contest to a count of DUI manslaughter and 2 counts of DUI with property damage. The presiding justice subsequently sentenced her to 11 years behind bars. Following her release, Welk would reportedly be subject to probation for 15 years. Number 1. Tahira Ahmed. A girl from Tulsa, Oklahoma, was taken to the hospital after being viciously stabbed by her mother on the night of May the 14th of 2018. The victim remained in critical condition with stab wounds to the torso, as well as puncture wounds to the legs, neck, hands, and face. Her mother, 39-year-old Tahira Ahmed, subsequently abducted her youngest daughter, triggering an Amber Alert in the area. The woman was located in a Tulsa parking lot the following afternoon. Her child was successfully recovered and determined to be unharmed. Ahmed smiled while being taken into custody and openly confessed to her crimes. She stated she'd become agitated with her 3 children, prompting her to bound them with duct tape. The eldest child fought back, at which point Ahmed reportedly hit her over the head with a pickaxe and stabbed her over 50 times. She then set the house on fire and fled with her youngest daughter in tow. The middle child managed to escape and alert the neighbors, who came upon her older sister in the burning home and brought her to the hospital. Ahmed was charged with assault and battery with a deadly weapon with intent to kill, first-degree arson, and abuse of a child. During interrogation, the woman described her oldest child as the devil and claimed to have tried to kill her out of fear for her own safety. The following April, Ahmed entered a blind plea, preventing her children from having to testify against her. She was ultimately found guilty of the counts levied against her and was consequently sentenced to 3 concurrent life terms, plus 10 years, all but assuring she spends the remainder of her days on earth behind bars. Subsequent reports confirmed that the eldest daughter had survived her catastrophic injuries and was recovering. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be incapable of lying or have the memory of a goldfish? Let us know in the comments section below.